Well, from who controls the spice controls the universe. And then if memes are spice, then it's memes. There's a little bit of truth to it in that, like how do you what is it that influences the zeitgeist? Like, how do things become interesting? That they, I think they can be very insightful. Throughout history, I think the symbolism in general has powerfully affected people. So, yeah. How did you get so good at them? I remember following you many years ago. Going from that to your sea shanties meme, or maybe one of the memes, and some of it may not be safe for work here. How did you get so good? Why do we actually say for work? This work. I guess probably. If you go back to my very early tweets, look, technically I was on Twitter. I think in the very early days when there were only maybe 10,000, less than 10,000 users. But then people were just tweeting what kind of latte they had at the University Street Starbucks, and I was like, I don't even know this. So then I deleted my Twitter account, and then a fake person who got my Twitter account and tweeted for a few years, and then my friend Lily said, hey, you really should be on Twitter so you can speak directly to people, so I was like, okay, I'll do. My friend Lily convinced me to regain my Twitter account, and my early tweets are pretty racy, pretty because I was reading this biography of Captain the Great, so it's sort of things went crazy from there. By the way, I like how you say that your early tweets were racy and not like now. I feel like that. Some people think oh, he's gone crazy on Twitter. I'm like, no, I started crazy on Twitter. What are the new things that you're following now with respect to these or creating? Sorry, what was that again? Yeah, I was just going to ask you, what are the new things that you're following or creating right now? What are the ones that are interesting to you right now? I don't really follow memes. You just make them? I make some of them, and then some of them are sent to me. I have some pretty kick-ass meme dealers. Yeah. Meme dealers? You want to have a good price. Are the people on Mars? Wait. You gotta have a good meme dealer. There will be. My friend Mike is a good meme dealer, and Claire as well, and Jake Gunnell, and quite a few others actually. I guess I personally am lucky recipients of very interesting memes. Today, basic subjects a bit, and just on Twitter. Today you had posted about Neuralink and why people should be working there. For folks who don't know about it, I thought it was really cool. Just the possibility of it is really fantastic. Tell us more about it. There are a lot of engineers listening on this clubhouse. What is Neuralink? Why should we care? What is possible with it? Sure. So, the long term. Okay, so Neuralink stems from a concern I had, where I was trying to figure out, even in a benign AI scenario, how do we at least go along for the ride? So, if for those that are following AI closely, it's obviously improving dramatically. If you see look say GPT-1 versus GPT-2 versus GPT-3, and just how radically that's improved. And just a deep mind some. I think they've run out of games to win at, basically. And this is, and look, I said like in Tesla, the thing, it's an important thing I note actually is like Tesla actually has one of the strongest AI teams in the world, but it's AI team focused on real world usability. So just really solving vision, perception, and control with AI. But even in a benign scenario for AI, where let's say like the AI is like just really wants to be super nice to us and make us happy. Well, how do we stay relevant and still have meaning and at least go along for the ride? That's in the good scenario. And then in terms of avoiding the bad scenario, to the degree we can couple collective human will to the outcome of artificial intelligence and what's developed in that way, I think that'll probably be a better scenario than if we're unable to effectively couple collective human will to that outcome. So, the final. Now, sorry, this is getting kind of esoteric, but I would keep going. Okay, so people are already a cyborg in that you already have a tertiary digital layer. You've got your sort of limbic system, which is your primitive drives, desires, and responses, and then you've got your cortex, which is like long-term planning and thinking. Those are two biological layers, and then there's a tertiary layer, a third layer, which is digital, and you already have that in the form of your phones and computers and all your applications. You're far more powerful than a human would be without those cognitive enhancements. But the bandwidth between your cortex and your digital tertiary layer is very slow, and in fact, with the advent of phones, it got even slower. So if you're thumbing, say what's the bit rate of a pair of thumbs on a phone? It's very low. I mean, let's be super generous and say it's 100 bits per second. Well, computers can communicate at trillions of bits per second. So it's, at some point, the computer gets smart enough. It's like the computer's just like trying to talk to a tree. Trees do sort of talk, but they talk so slow that we don't notice. So we need to improve the bandwidth. And with a direct neural interface, we can improve the bandwidth between your cortex and your digital tertiary layer by many orders of magnitude. I say probably at least 1,000 or maybe 10,000 or more. And we can also spend a lot more time thinking about interesting things as opposed to taking complex thought structures, compressing them down into words, which is also again a very low bit rate, and then having someone else receive those words, decompress them, and then send words back at you. So a huge amount of our brain power spent in compression, decompression, and we could be instead spending it on deeper concepts. And so if you had a neural link, if Google had a neural link, you could do conceptual telepathy, where you have a complex series of concepts, and you just transfer them directly uncompressed to the other. This would massively improve the quality of communication and the speed of it. So, there are other sort of pretty wild things that could be done. Like you could probably save state in the brain, and so if you were to die, your state could be returned either in the form of another human body or a robot body. I mean, this is getting like really, it's weird sci-fi stuff here. Before you get to carbon, right? This makes them talk like altered carbon. Go on, love it. Yeah, it's kind of like altered carbon. But I think you can decide if you want to be a robot or a person or whatever. And you wouldn't be exactly the same. So there'd be a little loss in transfer. But you could also say it's also arguably true that when you wake up in the morning, you're not exactly the same as yesterday. Or the you of a month ago is not the same as the you of today. A bunch of brain cells have died. There's got a little loss stages. But you could also say it's also arguably true that the point is like you wouldn't be. There could be something analogous to a video game, like a save game situation where you are able to resume, upload your last state. Yeah, kind of like altered carbon. Maybe lose a few memories, but mostly be you. So now that's the long-term stuff. In the short term, for Neuralink, the idea would really just be to address brain injuries or spinal injuries, and make up for whatever loss of capacity somebody has with a chip, with an implanted chip. So the first thing that we're going after is a wireless implanted chip that would enable someone who's quadriplegic or tetraplegic to control a computer or mouse or their phone or really any device just by thinking. And this obviously would be a massive enabler. Make life way easier for them. There have been sort of primitive versions of this device. One done with like wires sticking out of your head, but it doesn't work all the time, and you can't take it home with you. So just having basically, you think like in simplistic terms, I'd say it's sort of like a Fitbit in your skull with tiny wires that go to your brain. The Fitbit in your skull with tiny wires. So if somebody who's listening is good at designing like Fitbits, Apple Watches, phones, computers, various kinds, then actually the Neuralink. So yeah, we'll probably be releasing some new videos showing progress maybe in a month or so, and because we already got like a monkey with a wireless implant in their skull and the tiny wires, who can play video games using his mind. And he's totally totally so it's not look like an unhappy monkey, and you can't even see where the neural implant was put in. Except that he's got like a slight like dark mobile. But other than that, he's not uncomfortable and he doesn't look weird. So we're and us like when the USDA person came through and inspected our facilities, our monkey facilities, she said it was like the nicest monkey facilities she's ever seen in her entire career. Just FYI, we went the extra mile for monkeys. As long as you didn't make them play Cyberpunk. that would be it. That would be a hell of a trip for monkeys. But one of the things we're trying to figure out is like, can we have the monkeys play mind pong with each other? Yeah, that would be pretty cool.
I have to say the pig demo was really fantastic. That was really cool.
Thanks. Yeah. Well, it's great to hear Neuralink and making good progress. And like I said, I want to be clear. Like the early applications will really just be for people who've had a serious brain injury. Like where it's like the value of the implant would be enormous. Because obviously the early implants will come with some non-trivial risk, and so it's going to be like, okay, does the good far outweigh the bad, and then that would be a candidate for some of the initial surgeries with full disclosure of like these little risks and everything. And one of the things we're really paying close attention to is the ability to remove the implant. So it's like it's not like if somebody doesn't want it or it's not working, we can take it out and then we can reimplant another one. So we've tested implantation, removal, and reimplantation, and it works great.
Sorry, Martin, switching topics. Yeah, please. So switching topics. So Elon, I mentioned kids earlier. As it turns out, I have a very bright and inquisitive 5-year-old who is crawling all over everything and trying to figure everything out and learning as much as he can, as fast as he can. Like, what, with everything that we know now and kind of all the modern tools we have, like, what's the best way to think about educating a 5-year-old in today's world?
Sorry, the best way to educate a 5-year-old?
Yeah, educate a 5-year-old and then think about kind of his education over the course of the next, 5 or 10 years. Like, what kind of program ideally should you think a kid should be on?
Well, my observation is my kids were mostly educated by YouTube and Reddit, and then and their, I guess, classmates and I guess there were lessons as well, but judging by the amount of time they spent online, it seemed like most of their education is actually online. I think generally with education, you want to make it as interesting and exciting as possible. Like, what are some of the, like, if you see, like what are all the things, like, say, a good video game does to keep someone engaged and interested? If kids can be super engaged in video games, like this, we're super engaged in education as well. Like, one of the things that's, I think, very fundamental is to explain the why of things. Like, so we're teaching this. We're going to explain why we're teaching you this and why it is relevant. So I explain to them, they won't know. And then if you want to have some sort of engaging, if you're trying to say problem solving, some sort of engaging narrative, we'll call it problem solving. Like, it's like far better to say, okay, we're going to teach you how an engine works by taking apart an engine and then putting it back together. And then let's find out what tools are needed for in order to take this engine apart, put it back together. It's like, okay, we need screwdrivers, wrenches, and Allen keys, and we need a winch, and a bunch of other things. And then you understand the relevance, and it's much more interesting problem. This is much better than having, say, a course on wrenches or a course on screwdrivers. You just, like, start with a problem and say, what tools I need to solve this problem? That establishes relevance and gives a compelling narrative thread.
Yeah, it seems like you could kind of, if you had to sort of elaborate enough projects, you could roll a huge number of topics into that ultimately kind of combine into a single project with some really actually interesting formula. But for example, building literally building a vehicle or something like that.
Yeah, exactly. If you have the narrative thread with like, why is it all established relevance and there's a story to it, and then you say, like, well, you can't turn that bolt without the wrench, and then, like, let's see, how can we make this engine better? What do we need to do? Okay, well, let's calculate the gasoline engine. How do you get to a higher RPM or a better compression ratio? I'm using, like, an outdated analogy. You can say for an electric motor, what steps would you take to get higher torque, and pull higher power out of this electric motor? And then you can explain. It's obvious why things like Maxwell's equations become necessary in that situation. Yeah.
That's amazing.
Go ahead. Elon, you not believe the number of parents and people with kids who have asked us about tonight, and I think there are two questions that are connected. One is, how do kids, if you're having a kid and you want each to become a polymath like you have become, what advice you have for parents? And the next one is, here you are with, so many companies that you've created that I can't even list them off the top of my head. Why does the world have, and this doesn't mean to sound, psychopathic, but why does the world have more Elon Musks?
Well, I don't know. I might be getting too much credit here. For me, these things I've done have been because I've felt a strong compulsion to do them. So it's not like nobody's pushing me to do it, but they're just like a strong compulsion to do them. I wouldn't say, there are pretty long sections of my life that have been very painful and difficult, and I'm not sure if people would want to do that. There's if somebody wants to be me or do the things that I've done, I would say most probably you're mistaken. You do not want to do that. You'd have to have some kind of like rage demon in your skull that you just got to get it done. It's like people ask me, like, what encouraging words do you have for entrepreneurs who want to do a startup? My response is, if you need encouraging words, don't do a startup. My friend Lily, doing a startup, was like eating glass and staring into the universe for a long time.
Okay. We're going to switch topics, but I think for everyone in the audience who just caught up and they managed to squeeze in, just a quick reset/recap. This is the one and only Elon Musk for his first time on Clubhouse, and this is a show that we do every single day. I know a lot of you are trying to get in the room. There are a bunch of overflow rooms. See if we can get us there. But we're just having an amazing conversation with Elon. Elon, again, this is something you've joked about, but I'm kind of curious to get your, maybe serious answer to this, which is all things cryptocurrency and Bitcoin. You famous just change your Bitcoin. What do you think of?
Well, I got what's what I say here. This is so many things can really move the market. So, first of all, I should say many friends of mine have tried to convince me to get involved in Bitcoin for a long time. Like when it first just popped out there. I remember he actually had Bitcoin. So Bitcoin's the one, and he said he's like Bitcoin came in 2013. So clearly, at least went towards Bitcoin 8 years ago. Like what if you're late? Like Jesus, we're about being late. We're about being late to the party. So I was a little slow on the uptake there. My apologies. But I think about it for a bit, but I do at this point think Bitcoin is a good thing. So I am a supporter of Bitcoin. Like I said, it's late to the party, but I'm a supporter of Bitcoin. And I think Bitcoin is really on the verge of getting broad acceptance by sort of the conventional finance people, So, I think so. I don't have a strong opinion on other cryptocurrencies. I mean, I occasionally make jokes about Dogecoin, but they are really just meant to be jokes. But Dogecoin was made as a joke to make fun of cryptocurrencies, obviously. But fate loves irony, and often, as a friend of mine said, the most ironic outcome is most likely, or as I say, the most entertaining outcome is often most likely, and arguably the most entertaining outcome, the most ironic outcome, would be that Dogecoin becomes the currency of Earth in the future.
Oh my God. Elon, when you tweeted me this afternoon, I would say my tweet replies have been overwhelmed by probably a gazillion different cryptocurrency coins. But by the way, you might remember the infamous time when your replies were filled with cryptocurrency bots on Twitter.
Oh my God, it was insane.
That's actually how Elon and I actually wound up meeting, because that was a very painful time. Okay.
Yeah. In fact, and then I made a joke about Bitcoin, and my account got locked.
I had to actually try and convince some folks that was actually the real Elon Musk. Okay, so I want to bring us back to one of your companies. We actually have a Tesla Model S sitting outside our house right now. It carries us and our 2-year-old baby around, and we love it. Would love to get your take on, where you see, you just have a refresh of the Model S coming out. I just saw the review for it. Where do you just see, the future for Tesla, and especially when it comes to all things battery technology and self-driving? Those two topics a lot of people are very interested in.
Okay, so you're asking about the future of batteries and self-driving?
More like, where do you see Tesla over the next few years?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think that the goal with Tesla is to, and has been from the beginning, is to accelerate the advent of sustainable energy. So, in order to do that, we've got to make a lot of cars. We've got to make them increasingly affordable. And our rough target is we want to be able to eventually make 20 million cars a year. The reason for that is the 2 billion active trucks on the road, and figure you're not really moving the needle unless you're changing 1% of the existing fleet. And so that's roughly how we came up with 20 million cars and trucks per year. That's very important to accelerate them into sustainable energy. And then, of course, we've got stationary battery packs and solar, which is making a lot of progress on that front. So yeah, we're going to try to grow car production as fast as possible, and that the primary limiting factor there is battery cell production. So we're getting as much as possible from suppliers, but even that is not enough. So we're actually going to be building battery cells ourselves. But it's important to emphasize that to our suppliers who are great suppliers, that we're not trying to put them out of business. We want them to increase their rate as well. So Panasonic, LG, and CATL, and then to add to increase to accelerate sustainable energy further, we're making our own cells, and pretty excited about that. And then so I think we expect possibly an acceleration of compound annual growth, well, at least aspirationally, that's our goal. And then combine that with autonomy, and it's a very powerful story, because once you have autonomy or self-driving cars, you massively increase the utility of any given car. A typical car is driven about 12 hours a week. You think maybe depending on the situation where you live, like maybe an hour and a half a day or something like that. Or in LA, it might be 2 hours a day. So roughly 12 hours a week, and there's 168 hours in a week, a 7-day week. So most likely cars that are autonomous could maybe do a third of the hours of the week or something like that. So maybe they do, 60 hours a week of usage instead of 12. So you got basically a 5x increase in asset utilization there, and far less need for less parking garages and that kind of thing. So, but this in itself is good for the environment because you need fewer cars to get the same thing done, and we would need fewer parking garages in places just to keep cars when they're not in use, because they could just be in use a lot more. So. But the net of like having a lot of cars times automation or times self-driving, I think, is at the heart of why a lot of investors think Tesla is worth what it is. They're giving us a lot of credit for future execution, but I think the trend is there. It's quite positive. And I'd like to once again say, if anyone is interested in practical AI, AI that where the rubber hits the road, please Tesla's Autopilot/AI team. I think people don't quite appreciate that Tesla has some of the most advanced AI in the world, both on the software side and on the hardware side. And on the software, on the hardware side, we've obviously got our inference computer, which I think is still the best inference computer out there, even though it's been going for a couple of years. And then we're building Dojo, which will be the most powerful training computer. Because it's going to process vast amounts of video training data, and bringing the day of self-driving sooner translates directly to lives saved and injuries avoided. About 1 million people die every year in car accidents, and about 10 million per year have serious injuries. So that's the sooner the better, and a lot of lives will be saved and people's lives made better. Happens here.
Elon, on self-driving, you made headlines I think a while back when you basically, to put it mildly, criticized LiDAR as a key technology for self-driving. Could you talk more about that and why you're not such a huge fan of LiDAR?
Yeah, I mean, sometimes I'm just talking smack.
No, we didn't know that.
Yeah, it's time you knew.
We took it seriously.
I can see that. So, first of all, I'm not like fundamentally against LiDAR in all things because, for the SpaceX Dragon that launched the space station, we actually developed and built our own LiDAR for docking with the space station. So obviously, if I hated LiDAR, we would not have done that. And this is well before. This is like 10 years ago we started doing that. So I'm not like I don't have some sort of weird like antagonism to LiDAR. However, for driving on real world roads, you have to solve vision. You have to solve vision with basically understanding objects with passive optical photons, and then making sense of those objects. So like vision, perception. What do those objects mean? What are they going to do? What is the likely path of travel? And then control. And all of that really is AI. The way we're doing it is by running a bunch of neural nets in our head. So we got to run a bunch of neural nets to do the same thing in the car. And the point at which you solve passive optical, and this is better passive optical than a human has because we've got 8 cameras, 3 of which point directly forward, 2 that are diagonally forward, and 2 that are diagonally rear, and 1 rear. So the way we do it right now is we have all 8 cameras synchronized with, so you've got 8 frames connected simultaneously, and we're moving towards, and have in fact mostly moved towards video training. So you've got 8 surround cameras. It's like kind of a surreal thing to see because people look really, people have 2 eyes, but kind of like really more like 1 eye because the 2 eyes kind of combine. But anyway, the neural net is it needs to move to full video training, video inference, surround video training, surround video inference, and then it will be superhuman, no question about it. Because people don't have eyes in the back of their head. Like you basically have effectively a human, for all intents and purposes, it's like having 1 camera on a slow gimbal, and that is often distracted, and maybe sort of drunk or change the radio or they fall asleep or there's all sorts of things that go wrong. There's no question that you could be superhuman with just cameras. And I think if one is going to go with sort of active photon generation, I would recommend something in the occlusion penetrating wavelengths. So like radar, it's roughly 4 millimeter radar or something like that would be better if you're going to really delve into the arena of active photon generation.
Wow. Okay. That's amazing. Okay. Also, I love how deep we got into that. It was super, super fun. All right, I'm going to switch topic just a bit. I would say it's safe to say a lot of people are very interested in how you work. And you often, for example, describe yourself as an engineer. So walk us through, it's Monday morning, you wake up. What is a typical work day in the life of Elon look like?
I guess I'll wake up and see if there are any emergencies on text or email, and often there are. I mean, a ton of what I deal with is not actually fun or interesting. It's like chores. So I've tried really hard not to do my chores, but then if I don't do my chores, things go to hell. So, oh man, you have to do your chores. So, yeah,
it's
basically.
I'm a bit relieved that Elon Musk basically has the same schedule as the rest of us. We all do too, and you do too. And it's kind of, there's something just really relieving just hearing you say that.
Yeah, I mean that's pretty much how it goes these days. I do enjoy the in-person meeting more than email. In fact, I think I'm getting like a slight negative limbic reaction to email. It's killing me. Texts are way better to deal with, and then in-person meetings are much better. Even Zoom meetings or whatever, they're still better than email. Anything's better than email, frankly. So anyway, I'll have a bunch of meetings. I'll write email, write text, especially if it's like an email to the group, like saying, hey, I think we need to change direction, do the following things, and let me know if you think otherwise, but otherwise we're going to do these things, and get our act together in this area or that area. And then, a bunch of meetings. Most of my meetings are engineering and design, but of course we have to deal with finance and sales and other things, and the things that are necessary for a company to function. And then there's quite a lot of context switching, and so he sent me the meme of like, fear is not the mind killer, context switching is the mind killer, which I totally agree with. Context switching is a real bear. So just try to do less context switching. So maybe focus on one thing for an hour and then another thing for another hour. It's really hard to context switch between SpaceX and Tesla and all the things that are going on at SpaceX and Tesla, and then Neuralink boring company, which fortunately pretty low bandwidth. They're taking a high level of CPU load because they're smaller, and there's their personal stuff, and of course memes. Gotta get. That's important. How do you do that? Like, where's my meme now? You're expecting a meme by now. You're calling up your meme dealer for your hit of memes, Elon. Exactly. Elon, earlier last year I talked to Mark about how he spent his time, and Mark talked about, when you're younger, you used to have large blocks of open time on his calendar, and I think a lot of, well-known founders have large blocks of open time, schedule time. Now you are unique because you have multiple companies you're running. You're also much more engineered than traditional CEOs. What does your calendar look like? Are you allocated 30 minutes back to back? You have a lot of open space. How do you handle it? I don't have a lot of open space. It's generally back-to-back meetings, and it's insane. My days are like insane torrents of information. Sometimes people if you want to audit what I do for a day, it's insane. I don't recommend it. I was thinking, man, how long can I keep this up? Because I don't want my brain to explode. And it's like the meetings that are scheduled are not nice to have meetings. They're like, this meeting is essential. Okay. It's pretty intense. I think maybe I should at some point take a week off or something, clear my mind. Or I know there's a bunch of people writing books on Tesla and SpaceX, for example. It's pretty hard for them to get it right because they just weren't there. And maybe I should write some book of my experiences that has all the foolish mistakes I've done and some advice for others that might be helpful. I think so. A book, a documentary. I think I remember once hearing about how you still sleep on the floor of your factory. I really used to at one point in time. I did. I only if it was a crisis situation. And I actually. To the group and maybe have everyone.
No, you guys, he kicks me out. No, I'm so interested in your. Wait, hold on.
So,
that was so good for so long. It was, wasn't it? Ruben? I hope Tanya didn't get asked. Oh, okay. Context switch is my new favorite term. Yeah, I was thinking the same thing.
So what happened is I'm in a listen party right now, and I guess the person who was in there just got kicked out.
I can't.
You can't get back in.
You can't get back in.
Someone is in there and they. Oh, wait, I'm back.
Oh, cool.
No! No. Wait a second. Ah!
Most of the time, I did not sleep in the conference room because people could not see me in the conference room, so I slept on the floor outside the conference room.
I'm back.
Otherwise, how do people know, you know? They don't know. Seeing's believing, so I was there to sleep on the floor outside the conference room so they could see that I was there. Yep, that's an even more advanced level. Yeah, that's a little bit hard. I always wake up and smell like oil and iron filings. It was rough. Yeah, but I was asking people to really go all out, you know. I can't expect them to go all out if I'm not doing the same thing. That's super interesting because when people think, you know, and I can understand this about you, when people think, how does the religious person in the world live? They don't think uncomfortably sleeping outside a conference room with like a lot of loud banging going on like next door. They probably don't, but the people at the back do. They saw it themselves. I love it. That's what's important, you know. Okay, I love it. Okay, switching topic just a little bit. I think a lot of people, you know, okay, you have your hands full with Facebook and Tesla, you know, and the boring company and Neuralink. If you had to start, if you somehow magically found an extra 5 hours a day, and you had to start another company or another effort, what would you start? Well, I definitely have no plans to start yet another thing. You have lots of free time. Look at you. Yeah, my head will definitely float.
It's like a gladiator meme. Are you not entertained enough? Have you not created enough company?
I think there are still tremendous opportunities in tunneling. For 5 years, people asked me what I see opportunities, and I'd say tunneling, and then nobody did anything. So then, actually, initially as a joke, created the boring company. We did like test tunnel in LA, and then still people didn't believe us. And then so we just did our first operational tunnel in Vegas. But the world really needs tunnels because all major cities have traffic, and tunnels can have massively improved people's quality of life by making it easier to travel from one place to another in a city. And then that can be further expanded to long distance travel, where if you just go back to the tunnel, then you can go extremely fast, faster than a plane, and faster than a plane or a high-speed rail. So I really still recommend someone else if you start a tunneling company, that'd be great. Then there's RNA, mRNA, basically synthetic viruses, which is we've seen what's a good effect with BioNTech and Moderna. But I think we might quite appreciate that what's actually going on is the digitization of medicine. So it's where you can just literally, you know, create an RNA or DNA sequence like a computer program, and then encapsulate that in a you can multiply many billions of times, and encapsulate that in a lipid shell, so it looks like a tasty treat for your cells, and you can literally do anything. This is absolutely the future of medicine. You can probably figure out how to turn someone into a literal butterfly. Okay, your cells are biological computers. They execute just like sort of a multiple computer where you just need it. It's like a, you know, if you a tape, or a punch card, that's just need your cells, which are tiny computers. Those used for analyzing chips that Intel needs for making CPUs, and then another one was this biotech thing for it's basically there's three parts to it. There's a DNA multiplier, an RNA multiplier, and something which puts the shell on the RNA sequence. We're on like version 3 of it now, and they keep going. So I think even under 10% of resources, they're following going, and then it turned out like they actually be useful. I did love that you actually audience with an RNA fab. You've been talking a lot about how mRNA obviously has been key to the Moderna vaccines and all the COVID-19 vaccines. But when we deploy it, let us say somehow magically tomorrow you were running the vaccine effort, the distribution effort right now. What would you do to get the vaccine done?
Specifically around the logistic side, which is something to be doing a really good job across the world. So what would you do differently there?
Well, I don't have good insight into the situation as it stands, but I think relaxing the requirements on it, there's like to be there are too many requirements of who can get the vaccine. The vaccine was really it is important for anyone with that's elderly or has a compromised immune system, or is otherwise at risk for the virus. And I think really just saying like, first come first served, show up here, like use CVS and Walgreens, which give us the flu vaccine every year, and say, okay, just show up here, and especially for the Moderna and biotech the vaccines, which are quite temperature sensitive, they can only be sort of defrosted from the deep freeze briefly, and then they must be used or they lose their effectiveness. That's because my understanding is the RNA, because the RNA sequences they use are not stable. Those sequences want to reverse to something else. Because they're not stable, they must be frozen at a very low temperature, or they will simply want to revert to a lower energy state. RNA sequence, that's my understanding. So just like instead of worrying about like is the exact right person going to get the vaccine, like just accept that maybe some people should get vaccinated and get it like I can use that there and just not worry about the details. You can just get it to as quickly as possible. And for sure we should not worry about the quite yet. Just everyone must know. I suspect that you'll hear this is done into the community gratified and we're going to be significant. And we're going to the second dose is like there, so we'll have to pay advancing about the second dose. It's just worry about the first dose and first served, and don't worry about like accidentally getting that things to someone who maybe does, so that will happen a little bit. So that's my recommendation on that front. We are going to be there is going to be an avalanche of vaccine coming. I think USA have ordered maybe have ordered something like 900 million doses statewide. And the combination of there's going to be we're going to have so much the COVID vaccine. I guarantee you it will be thrown away later this year, more than we can possibly ever need or want. And then the Johnson & Johnson vaccine just got approved, which is that's good. It's more conventional vaccine, but it's a single shot, room temperature. And then there are more and more vaccines that are going to get approved. Hopefully the CureVac will be approved soon. I know because I know the Tesla machine, it can make a bazillion doses super fast. So, I think there's definitely, for those who are concerned about vaccine action, you should expect exponential increase in vaccine availability. And then combined with that, we are, I think, starting to approach some degree of herd immunity with people with contract with virus and
California, has been sort of bouncing between kind of 45th, 50th in the country, by states in terms of the speed of the rollout. And it for me, it sort of, it re-raises this question that's coming up more and more, which is, you and I, you're listening of built our companies, primarily in California up until now. What's your view of the future of California from here?
Well, first of all, I should say I love California, and I've lived half my life, more than half my life in California. Just, I am, Californian, so much of my, all my companies here, came here as a summer, came to Silicon Valley this summer to work on energy storage technology for electric vehicles way back in 92, I think it was, 92 or 93. This little company called Clinical Research, Los Gatos. And I got to Silicon Valley, so it was like good. And then it's for us to be working on sort of advanced capacity distribution electric vehicles, stress studies, and I'm putting that on hold for the internet and trying to get a job at Netgear, by the way.
No, I have heard that story indirectly. I would actually like you to tell us, so I can learn what mistake I made.
Okay, well, first of all, I wouldn't say I did a very good job of trying to get a job at Netgear, but I was convinced that the internet would be the future. Space engine, humanity is communicated by osmosis until then, but with the internet, it would be like humanity acquiring a nervous system that become much more of a superorganism. And so I was like, okay, well, I can do this effort on sort of advanced capacitors for use in electric vehicles, which may or may not be successful. I could get a PhD, but would it be useful or not? Uncertain. Or I could be part of building the internet, which is associated do a PhD and watch the internet get built right in front of me, or go to study, advanced studies on hold, and try to help, build the internet in some way. And you're a big on the internet company. It's in my resume, and they get a feedback, and then I tried hanging out in the lobby, but I was too shy to speak to anyone. And I was like, man, what if Charlotte and I am speaking in this lobby? Wow. And then I just started writing stuff for myself. Because I was like, okay, well, I'll just write stuff for myself. And I actually wrote the first mass directions to the internet. I'm not sure how many people are aware of that, but the first mass directions, yellow pages and white pages, I wrote it personally. It's just me on my computer. And when we started our first company, we only had one computer. The website only worked during the day because I was coding at night, and the server ran during the day. That's quite an adventure, that's for sure. Yeah.
I just want to let you know that the next time you show up with one of my companies and hang out in the lobby for an internship, you're going to get an internship.
Well, thanks, man. Yeah. What do you get the stuff running 24/7, like over Black Open Night?
We don't take a control. That's not okay.
We will provide you with not just one, but two computers.
Okay, I want to, wrap up with some light questions for you. We're talking about computers. What are you watching on TV? What are you reading right now? Well, I just finished watching The Last Kingdom, which I think is a great piece of, mostly accurate historical drama. There's Cobra Kai, which is, if you grew up in, it's so good. It's so good. It's such a big word. My goodness. They just they're the nice ones. Let's see, what else have we been watching?
What do you think of these men?
The
that's the show for you. And I will not say any more, but you will enjoy it.
All right, then. Oh, yeah, your game is pretty good. It's Mythic Quest.
Yeah. It's amazing. It's the TV show.
Yeah, it's a good one.
Did you see the Raven fragment, the most recent one?
Yeah, great.
Oh, good.
Have you seen Tenet yet? The new Christopher Nolan movie?
Yes, pretty good.
Wow. Okay. Did you understand Tenet?
Well, I think if you think too hard about Tenet, it's not going to make maybe complete sense, but I enjoy it.
It's funny because that's what Logan said too in one of the interviews. Just don't go deep into it. Just enjoy it for the movie. And 4 hours later, I emerged from there and being I still don't entirely get it. So I should, just skim through it. Just watch it for the fun of it.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, Elon. I think I don't want to take up too much of your time. It's been amazing. You've pretty much broken clubhouse. There are probably over a dozen, maybe more plural. And I think so many Twitter threads right now. You've been so generous. For all your listeners here and on Twitter, you've been asking for people to join Neuralink. You've been asking people to join Tesla. Do you have any final thoughts for everybody who's listening to you right now?
Well, do you want to hear the real story from Vlad, from Robin Hood, about what happened this week with GameStop?
Sure, go for it.
Okay, you need to let him somehow click on a button thing.
Let me figure this out.
While we're figuring it out, why don't you talk to us about the Galaxy, since you mentioned it right at the beginning?
Yeah, Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy by Douglas Adams is in fact a book of philosophy disguised as a silly humor book. And if you read it from the standpoint of, wow, this is an interesting book of philosophy, it's quite insightful. Especially it really goes to the point of the answer is easy once you probably can probably formulate the question. I like the fact that the ship is powered by infinite probability. It's called the article.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, he makes fun of bureaucracy index. The Earth essentially gets destroyed by a sort of clerical error or they basically decide that they need to have an interstellar highway and the Earth's in the way, and so they post the fact that the Earth needs to get destroyed for this interstellar highway. But of course, it's posted on alien bullet board that no one knows can access. And so then they're surprised that people on Earth are unhappy about this.